It's time for the Daily Stand Up Podcast presented by Agile Dad with your host, Lee Henson. Without any further ado, let's get started. Today, I thought it would be fun to talk about an article that was brought to my attention. This time, it's the 5 anti patterns of estimating user stories. So, this article came out by Jim Apodaca. I hope I didn't mess up your name too bad. And Jim put this article out on March 9th. So, it's a relatively new article, but I thought it would be fun to kind of talk about it and see where we stood and see how much we agree. And I'm just going to skip straight to the 5 anti patterns and talk about each one. So the first anti pattern he talks about is settling on the average. And I agree. If you get every single person to estimate, but one person says that testing's not included, so they up the estimate. Somebody else says, well, we didn't talk about automation. Somebody else says, what about security? Somebody says, oh, that's easy. It's just a quick GUI. If you put all those estimates together and average and come across, you're going to end up with a very poor estimate. If you put all those estimates together and add them together, you're going to wind up having a 30-point story that actually might only be 8 points. So I think that sometimes we abuse the power of the estimate and we abuse the power of story points to try to get everyone to come to consensus and move forward to the next story. And a lot of people leverage planning poker and say, well, that forced us to have the right conversation. So let's do planning poker. So we'll talk about the right things. And while I agree, planning poker does have you go through and have conversations, it also isn't always the answer. That sometimes planning poker teaches you that, okay, we all can't come to an agreement, so let's figure out what we can agree upon, right? And oftentimes that is an average. So I think that if you're settling for the average, that you are falling short. So good call, Jim. The second anti pattern is deferring to the most senior member of the team. All right, let's count to three and say it together. Ready? One, two, three. Hippo! If you're taking the highest paid person's opinion or the most senior person on the team and you're counting on them to give you the answer, what you're doing is treating them as a subject matter expert. Now, I've told a story many times about the gentleman that I knew that was a subject matter expert. He had 25 years of law enforcement experience. He was building law enforcement software. I mean, every single thing I could say about this individual would lead you to believe that this was the right individual that should be estimating all of our stories, that should be pushing forward and helping the team be successful. I mean, there was just a lot of good about having this person on our side being the subject matter expert for this product. The problem was when he left his job in law enforcement, they weren't even using software in their patrol cars. So it was just one of those things where, this person was respected because of the 25 years he had of experience, but it wasn't relative experience to the product he was trying to build. So sometimes we turn straight to the subject matter experts, the most senior member on a team, and sometimes that person might not be the right subject matter expert. So I guess one of the things that I always say is when you're talking about estimation, that you should defer to the team, but you should also make sure the Bafata has communication with the product owner to try to get things figured out beforehand, because I think we need to compare that initial estimate to the team's estimate to make sure we're all on the same page. All right, anti pattern number three, one of my favorites. Skipping the definition of done. Who needs it anyway, right? Here's what I got to tell you. Definition of done is probably one of the most crucial conversations you can have. And we need to evaluate and look at it each sprint, but it should be something that stays pretty consistent. So if you go to the Scrum Guide, the 2020 version of the Scrum Guide says definition of done is a formal description of the state of the increment when it meets the quality measures required for the product. It creates transparency by providing everyone with a shared understanding of what work was completed as part of the increment. If a product backlog item does not meet this definition of done, it cannot be released or even presented at a sprint review. Instead, it returns to the backlog for future consideration. So I think that that spells it out pretty well. Gone are the days where you say it works on my machine, it's done, but not it's done, but it's not done. And I know we've all heard those conversations. So this is just a great opportunity for us to nip it in the bud and say, you know what, it can't be that way. We need to have a definition of done that's solid, that we all can agree upon, and we need to make sure that it's realistic, but something that we're sticking to, right? Speaking of realistic, anti-pattern number four that Jim found was unrealistic estimates. Now, I see these all the time. No matter how clear you write the requirements, there's always one person who says, oh, yeah, we can get that knocked out in 20 minutes. And I'm like, you are crazy. Or there's someone who says, oh, that's going to take us months to do, when in actuality, we know it won't. So I think that we need to do a better job up front of making sure that stories have adequate preparation and that they're ready to enter the release planning session, that they're well refined, and that they're ready to go for sprint planning. So by the time they hit sprint planning, these estimates are no longer unrealistic. It's okay to put an initial estimate on a card and to refine that estimate. It's totally fine to do that all the way until sprint planning. But I think sometimes we ask the teams to do things in a record neck-breaking amount of time, and there's no way that they can get those things done, but they try to squeeze it in anyway because it's hard for them to say no. And it becomes a point of frustration. It becomes a point of just failure, and it allows the team to really take this in as an anti-pattern. And the more you ask them to do, the worse they're going to do at this. So it's just one of those things where they're never going to admit to you that they're overwhelmed. Okay, final one. Anti-pattern number 5. 1 day equals 1 point. I owe you a clap for that one. The second you start comparing time to points, you're hosed, you're done. You have decreased your estimation efficacy down to about 17%. The truth is, no person on the planet knows how long it is going to take them to do something. And if you give the same work to a different person, even on the same team, it will take them a different amount of time. There, I said it. Holy cow. And I don't care whether you use dog sizes, t-shirt sizes, dinosaur sizes, animal sizes. I don't care what you use as long as it's not associated with a number. Because the second you throw a number out, people are going to automatically say, 3 what? 5 what? Because people are automatically trained when they hear a number to identify that the number must equal some value. So my hope is that you'll look at these 5 anti-patterns and that when you go to estimate, you'll avoid these and that you'll take into consideration, hey, what can we do to get it right? Because what I can tell you is, Jim, congratulations. This is a strong article. I fully support what's being said here, and I encourage you to go take a look at it. I'm going to drop a link to this article in the description below. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. And as always, if you have an episode you'd like, or if you have a podcast or an episode or a blog post or an article that you'd like for us to review, send it over. We love to get those and we frequently get them. So we appreciate all of our listeners sending those in. If you've sent one in and you realize, hey, well, they haven't covered mine yet, don't panic. We have a little bit of a backlog, but we're getting through them as quickly as we can. So as always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.